A deal reached despite Israel's final sign-off outstanding, but which is expected imminently.
It gives us great pleasure in Qatar, Egypt, and the States to announce the joint efforts and the fact that the two belligerents in the Gaza Strip have reached a deal on the prisoner and the hostage swap and announce a ceasefire in the hopes of reaching a permanent ceasefire between the two sides, as well as allowing the access of large quantities of relief aid to the Palestinian brothers in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli government will be taking the internal measures, after which the agreement will enter into effect on Sunday, January 19th. The exact timing will be identified later.
Phase 1 of the deal would see fighting stop in Gaza for 42 days and the staggered release of 33 Israeli hostages over a number of days in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Israeli forces would move out of populated areas to the outskirts of Gaza. Based on the successful implementation of Phase 1 and ongoing negotiations, a second phase is mooted when the remaining living hostages would be exchanged for an undisclosed number of Palestinian prisoners and the full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Phase 3, likely only months later, would see the exchange of bodies of deceased Israeli hostages and Palestinian fighters, while the implementation of a reconstruction plan for Gaza would commence.
During Phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all the areas of Gaza. And the surge of humanitarian assistance into Gaza will begin, and the innocent people can have greater access to these vital supplies. You know, during the next 6 weeks, Israel will negotiate the necessary arrangements to get Phase 2, which is a permanent end of the war. Let me say it again, a permanent end of the war. There are a number of details to negotiate to move from Phase 1 to Phase 2, but the plan says if negotiations take longer than 6 weeks, the ceasefire will continue as long as the negotiations continue.
The agreement also welcomed by the United Nations chief, who had been calling for a ceasefire for months without success, that is, until now.
The United Nations stands ready to support the implementation of this deal and scale up the delivery of sustained humanitarian relief to the countless Palestinians who continue to suffer. It is imperative that this ceasefire removes the significant security and political obstacles to delivering aid across Gaza so that we can support a major increase in urgent life-saving humanitarian support. The humanitarian situation is at catastrophic levels, and I call on all parties to facilitate the rapid, unhindered and safe humanitarian relief for all civilians in need.
He also pointed to the broader political issues that existed before this latest fighting erupted on October 7th, 2023.
This deal is a critical first step, but we must mobilize all efforts to also advance broader goals, including the preservation of the unity, contiguity and integrity of the occupied Palestinian territory, because Palestinian unity is essential for achieving lasting peace and stability, and I emphasize that unified Palestinian governance must remain a top priority. I urge the parties and all relevant partners to seize this opportunity to establish a credible political path to a better future for Palestinians, Israelis, and the broader region, ending the occupation and achieving a negotiated two-state solution with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security, in line with international law, relevant UN resolutions and previous agreements, remain an urgent priority.
A moment that could provide a sea change in the region. And while there is great relief that we now have a deal that could lead to an enduring peace, we are still very much at the beginning of a process that would hinge on the commitment of both parties to adhere to its prescripts, on the successful implementation of Phase 1, the release of hostages and Palestinian prisoners, and the scaling up of humanitarian assistance. that could create the necessary conditions and goodwill to continue negotiating the commencement of Phase 2 and so forth. Put plainly, we still have a long way to go for this ceasefire to be a success. Sherwin Bryceby's SABC News, New York.